So as it stands right now, Jaire Alexander is still on the Packers roster. And with free agency starting, all that going down, a lot of trades going down around the NFL, Jaire was not traded. Jaire was not released. So currently, he is still on the Packers roster. And there was some information that came out earlier this morning in an article from Rob Demovsky I want to share that gives us an update as to what's going on with Jaire and the Packers right now. So here it is from Rob Demovsky on ESPN. While Alexander remains on the roster, the Packers are still trying to trade him, according to team sources and a source close to the player. They could wait indefinitely, but most likely would prefer to get something done before next month's draft. One source said the team has not approached Alexander about taking a pay cut, and that even if it did, he would not be willing to do so. Without a trading partner, the Packers would likely release him, but there is no urgency to do so because he has no guaranteed money left on his deal until the start of the regular season when he's due $17.5 million. So as it stands right now, the Packers are still trying to trade Jaire, and they still haven't approached him regarding taking a pay cut. And so the odds of Jaire staying in Green Bay don't seem to have increased. It looks like the Packers just haven't found a trade partner at this time, which would make me think that teams out there aren't willing to give up whatever the Packers are asking for in return for Jaire Alexander. And I do wonder what the Packers want in return, because I think when you look at Jaire, there's no doubt if he didn't have his injuries over the past 4 seasons, I don't even think the Packers would be trying to trade him. I think that's a big factor. And I would assume that his injury history is something that teams that are wanting to bring him in are probably concerned about, which could mean that they don't want to trade, draft capital that they feel is maybe too risky for a guy who's, played in the past 4 seasons, 4 games, 16 games, 7 games, and 7 games, which is completely understandable. And because it looks very much like the Packers will move on from Jaire regardless, even though I think there's always a small chance that things turn around, even if nothing right now is really showing us that. But teams around the NFL have to know that if the Packers don't get what they want in a trade, they could end up just releasing Jaire. So it could be that lots of teams are just waiting for that to happen so they don't have to give up any draft capital. And Rob Demovsky brought up the draft as the next date where the Packers would probably want to get something done by that time. Because if you're the Packers and you're trying to trade Jaire, you definitely want to pick in this 2025 draft so that player can impact your 2025 regular season, because if you wait until after the draft, then it'll be a 2026 pick. And so it could be that as we move towards that date, maybe the discussions the Packers may be having with other teams continue. Maybe the Packers, as they get closer to the draft, come down on what they're asking, and maybe some team out there is willing to give some kind of draft capital. And so that's something just to keep an eye on as we move forward, because as it stands, Jaire's on the roster. We have Nate Hobbs, who was signed last week, Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine. And I was, just thinking about it. What if Jaire somehow did stay in Green Bay? There's no doubt when he's healthy, he still plays really great football. He's still 28 years old. I still feel like he has good football in him. The question and the uncertainty is in his injury history and if he'll be healthy in 2025. So if the Packers were able to get Jaire to take a pay cut, I would love to see him in Green Bay. I love Jaire. I think he's a great player. And so that's something to keep an eye on. It looks like it's not very likely at all. Like there's nothing showing us that could be the case, really. There was one thing I read in a Matt Schneidman Athletic article that said that Jaire did text Nate Hobbs when Hobbs signed with the Packers. And I think that is somewhat interesting, just because part of me had wondered if Jaire was sort of checked out completely from the Packers, if he knew they were trying to trade him. Maybe he just wouldn't even, text a new player. But I think that shows the kind of guy Jaire is, because even if the Packers plan to move on, he's still welcoming the new guys onto the roster. So when I saw that, it did make me wonder, is there a chance that Jaire comes back and that maybe the two sides just are so far apart? It sounds like they haven't even tried to have a discussion about that. But could that change? Could there be a day where they say, okay, you know what? Maybe Jaire realizes that teams out there potentially aren't willing to pay him what he thinks he's worth. Maybe he takes a pay cut to stay in Green Bay eventually. I would lean towards that not happening, but I think in the NFL, we see all the time that things can drastically take turns. You see Myles Garrett saying that he wants to go somewhere to win, and then he just stays with the Browns because they give him a $40 million a year contract. And that was probably, a negotiation tactic on his part. So I think in the NFL, you can't always rule out things, even if it looks pretty clear a guy will be gone. I would assume Jaire's going to be gone. But at the same time, if he ended up taking a pay cut, I would like to see him in Green Bay because if he's healthy, the Packers no doubt would have a better secondary with Jaire on the roster than Jaire not on the roster. And of course, as well, the other thing to keep in mind is the cap savings the Packers will get from moving on with Jaire, which we've talked about a lot. But it is different based on if they move on from him before June 1st or after June 1st. I'm pretty sure you can claim someone as a post-June 1st release, even if they technically get released before. I'm pretty sure things like that go down. But before June 1st, $18.1 million dead cap hit in 2025, $6.9 million saved on the cap in 2025. Then after June 1st, if released or traded, $7.9 million in dead cap in 2025, $10.2 million in dead cap in 2026, and then a total of $17.1 million of cap space saved in 2025. So the question becomes for the Packers, would they rather take the whole cap hit in 2025 or spread it out between 2025 and 2026? And I feel like either scenario could work. If the Packers want to make some kind of big move and they think they need a little more space this year, okay, split it up between the 2 years. If you don't think so and you want to have more space next year, then you could do it after June 1st. So that's something to keep in mind for the Packers. But I think that this secondary, the Packers have added some depth now with Nate Hobbs. I assume they'll add some more depth, coming into the draft. But that is it for this video. If you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.